Hello, my name is Chris Peytier. I'm an integration specialist, and I would like to spend the next 20 minutes or so to go into more details regarding Oracle Integration Cloud, and in particular, to answer some of the questions that we normally don't go through before going into the how. We often go quickly to the how questions, which is to understand how the solution works and how it can be implemented. But I would like to spend a bit more time also before going there, answering two other key questions, namely the why question and the what question. The why question is important because before we drill down into a solution, it's important to understand why it's been designed and what kind of business problem does it address. And that's what I would like to do. And then we'll go into the what question, which is to open the box a little bit and look inside for the components, the modules that you can be finding there and what they do. So the first question to ask ourselves when we go to the why is the purpose of the solution. And the thing I would like to share with you is that when it comes to building a digital platform, the Gartner Group has found out or have defined the fact that through 2020, integration work will account for about half of the time and the cost of building a digital platform. So this is a significant amount of time and energy used. And the reasons for that is in principle, mainly because integration is a complex matter. You have components in the cloud, solutions running in the cloud, as well as obviously solutions running on-premise. And the reality is that most of our customers are actually running both. Therefore, the need for what we call the hybrid architecture is increasingly present. And that means a few things, a few issues that we most of the time have to deal with. First of all, because there are so many moving parts in most of the companies, we end up having a fairly incomplete view of the business because part one does not necessarily know what part two does, and we end up with a very fragmented visibility. The second element is because also of those many moving parts and many separate connections, we end up with a fairly inconsistent experience, meaning that depending on whether you are doing an access to solution A or to solution B, you could end up with a very different experience, different GUI, different process, different function key to use, and essentially a different tool. And that means that the learning curve is important, and the ability to switch from one application to the other is not so fluid because of precisely this inconsistent experience. The third thing to look at is, again, because we have so many moving parts and the system are usually connected in a way that is so brittle, the cost of upgrading and maintaining is increasingly important and in fact is exponential with the number of parts that we're connecting to. And that means that such a system is going to make a company very slow in being able to upgrade and to keep up with the market demands. Also, we can see the fact that connecting SaaS to on-premise application is becoming fairly difficult because of the difference in architecture, difference in speed of evolution, difference in network capabilities, and so on. The last point I'd like to address is the speed of delivering. In other words, every time you want to build a new application or a new system or a new marketing campaign or whatever request you are having from the business, a system that is designed in such a way is going to be very slow to change. And therefore, the speed of delivery is going to be very slow. So if we go back to the challenges we see more from a solution perspective, we typically see three areas in which we have been focusing on. The first one is HCM, so human capital management. And we see quite a few of our customers coming to us and say, well, we need our modern and legacy HR system to work together because let's face it, in human resource, we typically have a real big difference of speed between some applications that are traditionally very slow in motion. I mean, human capital record management, employee data, date of hire, experience, promotions, and all the history of an employee. These are traditionally things that are usually found more in the legacy systems. And on the other hand, there is an increasingly number of applications that are used in the cloud, recruitment application, talent management application. These applications are usually more fast paced. They need to change quickly. They need to be connecting to a lot more systems. For example, hiring an employee may require access to a travel management application to make sure that this employee is allowed to travel to a particular destination and that the cost of his travel is going to be approved by a certain level of management, et cetera, et cetera. So HR is really a case where we typically find a very strong pressure between the need to integrate cloud-based application and on-premise application. In the ERP world, we also see quite a bit of challenges in the need to integrate a variety of applications, and I will detail that a little bit in the next slide. The third category here, CX, customer experience, is where we're going to see challenges such as the need to synchronize product data with purchasing system or quoting system, or for example, the need to update a marketing site or an e-commerce site in order to give it the latest warehouse management inventory data so that this site remains up to date. I'll just give you a concrete example. I was speaking recently with the quality director of a large European firm doing DIY, do-it-yourself kind of applications and stores. So they sell tools and material for constructing your house and so on. And this director was telling me that they recently found that they had about 7,000 products that did not carry all the data they were supposed to. In particular, all the quality data, the quality measurement, whether they pass safety regulations and so on. They were missing 7,000 rows, 7,000 product lines were not complete. And that led them to do a very tedious manual work to comply with the needs for the regulations on those 7,000 products. So let's focus a little bit more on the ERP specifically. So some of the challenges you will hear, and some of the challenges that we certainly hear at Oracle with our customers, is the need to consolidate and connect some of the SaaS cloud application with some of the on-premise order entry system, which have been there for a long time. For example, supply chain is connected by email. This is really something that we hear a lot. The employees are actually exchanging emails to integrate their supply chain. The third one here is also very important, and we hear a lot of managers requesting this kind of information. We need visibility into orders throughout the whole process cycle. I'll just give you an example of another customer who is selling mobility equipment, and some of their salespeople, when they go to potential customers or to existing customers, they're asked the question, where's my next order? When is my wheelchair going to be delivered? And the reality is that they were not able to answer this question, and they had to go back and say, I'm sorry, I'll come back to you with this information. Well, now with Oracle Integration Cloud, they're able to look at it from their tablet, and within a couple of minutes, they're able to pinpoint exactly where the order is. And they can answer the customer, well, your equipment will be delivered to you in 7 days, or whatever the answer is. So if we look at the ERP situation, again, in a little bit more detail, we can see that there are traditionally 3 or 4 big process chain that you will find. The first one is requisition to fulfillment. So I open a requisition for a new cell phone, for example, And the process here is between the moment I do this to the moment where my order is fulfilled. That's a very traditional integration that we find in a lot of our customers. The second one, which is very common, is the invoice to payment. From the moment that an invoice is created to the moment where the payment is actually taken into account. Here again, there's a very long process and sometimes requiring quite a few human steps in order to be performed. The third one, which pretty much every organization also has, is the fulfillment to invoice. Okay, the order is fulfilled between this moment and the moment where an invoice is going to be created for the customer. What are the required steps? And then finally, this one also quite frequent, payment to receipt. Between the moment a payment is actually done to the moment where the receipt is actually handled to the customer. What do we do in there? So you see, those four processes are fairly ubiquitous. Most companies have them. But the question is, how can we have a global visibility, not just on one of them, but on all together? Because at the end of the day, a manager is going to want to know how this is going from the beginning of process number 1 to the end of process number 4, and not just a fragmented view of the analytics. So this needs to be able to measure, to have KPIs, to look at those KPIs, and to create reports based on those KPIs. This need is really something that is of value to any manager in any company. So now we have looked at the why question, and we understand a little bit more of the meaning behind the need for such a solution. Let's look at the what question. So what is in the box? So essentially, I would say that in the Oracle Integration Cloud box, you will find 4 main components. The first component is the application integration itself. We could view it as what we used to call a bus, which is where you have a request coming into somewhere and conveyed to somewhere else. Typically, a client will do a request and it will be fed into some form of backend with, of course, everything in the middle. So in an application integration, you will have to deal with questions such as, how do I integrate with my backend? How can I deal with a variety of choices, such as being able to fork a request towards a particular output versus going to another output if the conditions are different, and so on. The second one is dealing with process automation. This means the ability to take a workflow and automate it in a way where we are going to be able to eliminate as many manual repetitive process as we can. The third one, integration insight. Here we are going to answer a question which I addressed in the previous slide, which was the ability to figure out how the business is going across this variety of integrations. What I mean by how is the business going, it is really a question of KPI, milestones, and SLA. Here, I want to be able to know whether a full process is taking longer than it should, or a full process is stuck at a particular place. This is the kind of thing that, as a manager, I need to be able to figure out. This is the kind of precious information that I want to have visibility upon. The fourth box here, web and mobile development, is going to give us the ability to define some particular front end, define an application in the way that I want it to be presented to my client users. This has to be independent of the type of device it's going to run on, whether it's a PC, whether it's a mobile phone, or what have you. So this is what I have in my big Oracle Integration Cloud box here. These are the 4 subcomponents that I just described. On the left side here, we also want to highlight the fact that, as we already said before, Oracle Integration Cloud will give us the ability to touch cloud-based application, to touch on-premise application, and therefore contribute to what we call the hybrid architecture, where we will see both cloud and on-premise linked together. On the right side, we also have to deal with the API management, because exposing endpoints to the outside world is also something which is getting increasingly important and increasingly complex, because API management is not just about making an endpoint accessible. It's also about being able to design those endpoints, to govern them, which is to create SLAs, to create security rules, and potentially to monetize them. I might want to have some endpoints that are giving access to some particular services, and I want to be able to draw some money based on my customers' usage of those endpoints. Okay, let's go now and drill down a little bit in some of the key capabilities that we can find in those 4 modules here. We spoke about application integration. So the key feature that we will see here is the ability to link to a collection of pre-built adapters. That's really a very powerful feature, because Oracle Integration Cloud comes with over 60 pre-built adapters that are going to make it a lot easier to connect to whatever backend system I decide to. The other important element here is the pre-built integration recipes. This means that we have already pre-built a collection of workflows that we know are normally very often used by our customers. For example, in the case of human resource, I will have an employee onboarding integration recipe, which will define already all the steps that are required to do an onboarding process, including touching Taleo or touching Oracle HCM Cloud. The last element here is connect SaaS with on-premise application. So here again, we're going to have the ability to implement that hybrid architecture that I was mentioning a couple of slides ago, by the fact that some of the connectors will touch the cloud-based application, the SaaS-based application, and there is the ability to use the on-premise agent, which will be running on-premise, and therefore Oracle Integration Cloud will give the ability to join those 2 worlds, to join the cloud world to the on-premise world. When we speak about enterprise connectivity, those pre-built adapters that I was referring to on the previous slide can be sorted in a variety of categories here. I'm not going to list them all, but you can see ERP connectivity, HCM connectivity, and CX connectivity, which are the 3 main areas that we have talked about. But there are also some other connectors, adapters, if you will, in particular what we refer to as technology connectivity, that will be giving us the ability to touch some files directly via FTP or via the file server, go and connect to AWS, Amazon AWS if need be, etc., etc. The small box in the middle, RPA connectivity. We will come back to this in a second, but RPA, robotic process automation, is also going to be used via connectors to UiPath, Blue Prism, and Automation Anywhere. And I think that with those 3, we cover about 80 or 90% of the RPA market. Finally, last but not least, productivity and social. So here you will see all the connectors to software such as Google Mail, Calendar, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc., etc. And finally, I don't want to leave this slide before insisting on the fact that those adapters are actually maintained and supported by Oracle. So in terms of upgrades, this is really a nice way to limit the maintenance and upgrade costs, because Oracle will ensure the upgrade compatibility with the rest of the environment that we are connected with. So we mentioned a little bit RPA, robotic process automation. So the interest of RPA is mainly in the fact that a robot can do two very interesting things from our perspective. First of all, it can automate some human tasks. And that means that something that would normally be done by a human can be recorded and replayed in an automated way, in a way that is going to save potentially a lot of tedious work. The second thing is that the ability to record some particular keystrokes or some particular access to a system is going to give us the possibility to connect to systems that would otherwise be unreachable. For example, if we look at some of the older mainframe access requirements, well, those mainframes did not have SOAP or REST connection capabilities. So the only way you can, for example, integrate with an IMS database or a vSAM file would be via access through a 3279 terminal. So a robot will give us the ability to capture the keystroke that you use when you connect to such a robot and mimic that automatically so that it essentially extends the reach of Oracle Integration Cloud to include systems that would normally not be reachable. So process automation is also, as we have seen, one of the 4 key components. And this module will allow us to automate workflows in a way that can be very intelligent as to who is going to do what next. So digitalizing end-to-end business process is becoming a lot faster and a lot easier because we can use some standards such as what you see in the screen here, which is BPMN 2.0 standard. And that allows us to define the flow of human tasks as they are modeled. But it goes beyond that. We also have the ability to define some rules using another standard, namely DMN. And DMN notation will allow us to create some logical components, such as a decision table, an if-then-else statement. All these can be defined in a centralized manner so that it can be leveraged across several different processes. So as you can see, we can model processes in a way that is going to save a lot of tedious manual work that would be otherwise very complicated to perform. Going to the third module we discussed, Insight Analytics. This is going to give us a real-time visibility into those processes as we have already defined them. So whether it's an integration or a process, we are going to be able to define those key milestones in a drag and drop manner, which is giving us then the ability to coordinate the activities around those milestones. And that, for example, will let us know where is an order, what number of processes have been done so far, how many processes are remaining before it gets finished, and that will help us to derive SLAs, service level agreements. For example, I want to receive an alert as a manager if an order takes more than X minutes, or I want to receive an alert if I see that more than a particular number of orders have not been processed today. So this will give us the ability to prevent business failures and delay tasks by giving us those early warnings so that a human being can then take action if need be. And finally, so the embedded dashboards will give us the ability to integrate them in a variety of client applications so that it becomes a lot more flexible for a manager to have access to those alerts, those early warning signs, all those SLAs. The fourth box in the OIC solution as we have seen, is Visual Builder. And this is a low-code developer tool that is going to give us the possibility to create front ends in a very flexible way so that they can then be displayed in a variety of clients' tools, whether it's a PC or a mobile phone. So with this tool, we can create very ad hoc, very precise graphs or forms or feeds, and this will give us a variety of choices from a visibility perspective. So just to finish with a real use case that potentially can be found with a large variety of companies. Let's say, for example, I have a closed opportunity handled in Salesforce, and that has to trigger a process that will feed into an Oracle NetSuite order management system. And eventually that order management system needs to give the hands to a trade regulation officer who will be able to look at the way to approve this trade based on a variety of criteria. And then finally, once this is done, it could have to go and create a particular record in a system such as a document management system, which could or could not be accessible directly. So we might want to use maybe a robot, an RPA solution in there. So if we look at this in more details, we would be able to do this with Oracle integration and process automation. In other words, OIC, Oracle Integration Cloud, will give us every element needed to perform such an end-to-end application. So the most extensive modeling capabilities in the market are going to be covered here, whether it's via a structured or an unstructured process management. And this opens the door to the connection to a variety of intelligence sources via an API-first approach. So we can use those solutions to access, for example, as we just said, a robot, so that the tasks can be automated via the robots. Just to finish on this, at the bottom of this will be the real-time operational insights. As we have seen before, the ability to define milestones and probes into the variety of systems that are going to be comprising this integration. Well, that ability will be a key to derive a real value from the information, such as post-mortem daily or weekly reports, but also, as we have seen, real-time or quasi-real-time SLA and KPIs, so that a particular set of people, managers or operation managers, can look at it and act upon the system if it's not behaving in the way that we want it to be. Last but not least, I want to say that Oracle was named as a leader in the iPaaS market, Integration Platform as a Service market. And we're very proud of it because it's the third year in a row that Oracle is named in that leader quadrant. And this is a testimony to the ability to execute of Oracle in this field, as well as our ability to innovate in this market. And I will conclude my presentation on this note. Thanks for watching.